What happened at a wedding that made it obvious that the bride and groom shouldn't be getting married? Are they still together? My sister-in-law got married last fall, and after the ceremony they got in an epic fight over the marriage certificate and didn't come to the reception until 2 hours after it started. A week later, they separated for a few weeks while trashing each other on Facebook. They're still together, and she's now pregnant. Edit. I also photographed this wedding, and it was the most stressful professional experience I've ever had. I forgot to mention too that the groom and groomsmen dropped a bunch of acid before the ceremony and continued into the reception. He freaked out, had a panic attack, and left. Dropping acid before your own wedding is a bold move. On their first dance, he kept trying to kiss her, and she would avoid it very subtly. I noticed that and thought I don't think she loves him. I wasn't wrong. They divorced within the first year. I saw a video of the first dance like this. My brother-in-law taped it and said this couple is getting divorced. Not even 3 months later they were divorced. They got married after a 10-year relationship. The wedding was painful to watch as they had such a bad fight the night before. They barely spoke to each other all day, hardly looked at each other. They split up 8 weeks later. I know 3 couples who were together for over 10 years before getting married and none of them worked out. You'd think they'd have a good foundation in the relationship, but I guess getting married sets different expectations, and by that point, no one wants to change anymore. About an hour before my cousin's wedding she made the comment that her next wedding wasn't going to be as big and complicated. She was right, her second wedding was super small. Holy shit. I came here to post something similar. I was a bridesmaid in a wedding where the bride was planning her next wedding in the car on the way to the wedding. Everyone was completely silent before her maid of honor said, "Let's just get through this one." Edited to update. The couple lasted 3 years. At a friend's wedding 2 years ago, the bride kept the bar open until 3 AM after the groom went home at 10 PM. She kept telling everyone that she is just with him because he has money and a flat. They are now going through a divorce after she cheated on him. 10 as old as time. The bride got so drunk that the bar cut her and everyone else off. The groom was also drunk. People started leaving at midnight, and the bride got mad and yelled about how they were all ruining her wedding because she wanted to dance and drink more. I was their designated driver to get them to their hotel. The entire drive there, they fought. She berated him. He cried. That was a long 20-minute drive. I could have scrubbed vomit out with cleaners, but the awkwardness has stained that car forever. They've been together 7 years. Their daughter, born 9 months after the wedding, is adorable. __. So I figure from reading this thread that couples having fight during weddings either mean divorce in 6 months or married for a long ass time. We were good friends with a couple who fought all the time. She wanted to get married desperately, and he was indifferent. After years of nagging he finally proposed. On the day of the wedding, right before he walked out, he looked at us and sighed. Well, maybe now she will stop nagging at me and finally be fucking happy. They are now divorced. She cheated on him with some guy she used to date. Why fight with him to marry her only to then cheat and get divorced? What a complete waste of time for both of them. A wedding guest looking out of the window beamed at the groom waiting at the altar and said, "She's here," and the groom jokingly pretended to run away. It went down like a lead balloon because he had actually run away the previous year, literally went out to the shops, and didn't come back for 8 weeks while she was pregnant with their first child. The bride's mother gave him a look that would have wilted the wedding flowers, and happy chatter in the room turned to frosty silence just in time for the entrance of the bride. They are still together many years later and have had more children together, but I wouldn't describe them as happily married. The way you described the bride's mother's face was fantastic, lol. Bride got drunk and started screaming about how much she hated her in-laws, who were obviously within earshot. They lasted a few years, had kids, and unfortunately are spending thousands in a nasty divorce right now. Man, this sucks. I hate my in-laws too, but I'm always nice to them. While getting up the stairs, the groom stepped on the bride's gown. She turned and slapped him and called him blind. He turned the other way and left. Oof, good for him. The groom had his car stolen on the morning of the wedding and spent the whole day swearing and punching inanimate objects because, as we all heard 1,000 times that day, not only was it the most important thing in his life, it also wasn't insured. The wedding was at a Boy Scout hall for no apparent reason, and the reception was in the cafeteria at one of those underwater world places with the glass tunnel. But no one was allowed to go see the fish because, get this, the whole day had a Lion King theme. Then towards the end of the night the bride beat one of the bridesmaids half to death because she caught her fucking a groomsman who she tearfully admonished for cheating on her. I have no idea how long the marriage lasted for. I never saw or heard from them again. One of those underwater world places with the glass tunnel, but no one was allowed to go see the fish because, get this, the whole day had a Lion King theme. This is one of the most insane things in the entire thread. Having a reception in an aquarium is weird enough. Having a Lion King themed wedding is just beyond comprehension. Combining the two and forbidding people to look at the fish is frighteningly crazy. During the cake cutting he smashed cake in her face. She immediately started crying and went to the bathroom for about 30 minutes. Then they got into a huge fight and barely spoke the rest of the night. Shockingly they are still married, but they still fight all the time. She's my friend from college, so we keep in touch occasionally. She never has good things to say about him. My mama has always said it's pretty telling how a couple behaves during the cut of the cake. I've always paid attention to that, and she is right. The level of respect they have for each other shows up better at this moment than any other. My brother's wedding. It was super uncomfortable and awkward during their engagement. My parents kept asking him if he was sure. He said yes. Then came the wedding. Super small. When they said to kiss, they both went in for a peck, but she turned her face at the last minute, so he kissed her cheek. My husband yelled for them to do it again. I was also their wedding photographer and he knew I didn't get a good shot. The marriage only got weirder and worse from there. They acted like they were on an awkward first date every day. Finally a year later they divorced. When the priest equivalent said, "You may kiss the bride," she turned so that it would be a kiss on the cheek. Even as a child, that set off alarm bells. They have been divorced for a long time. I saw this like 2 weeks ago. They both work in healthcare, and I know the bride works as an IQ nurse, so she sees a lot of super sick people. And apparently they haven't been kissing each other at all for the last month. Like total contact precautions. It's sweet, and especially in the current pandemic makes perfect sense. But it looks weird. Now the weirder part was the toast made very deep into the open bar. One of the hospital coworkers said they hope they got corona because it's a 2-week quarantine that the hospital pays for. And fair enough, that's a fairly nice honeymoon. Bride's father ran away with groom's mother on the day of their wedding. Groom snogging his cousin in the garden. He was caught doing coke in the car before the wedding started. The bride was pregnant at the time. They are still married. Fight constantly and now want another baby. They don't call it a white wedding for nothing. Shortly after the ceremony the groom announced to everyone including his bride, my niece, that he had enlisted in the Navy and was due to report in a few weeks. She was beyond surprised. They didn't even make it a year. The bride and groom both got coked up and got into some kind of argument over the bride wanting him to help her undo her dress. It ended with the groom beating the bride beyond recognition and being arrested. He was charged and given a restraining order and their marriage lasted 1 day. Not so much evidence that they shouldn't have been together, but evidence that Maisel is just a horrible thoughtless person. The wedding was supposed to start at 3 p.m. At 3, she was getting in a bathtub in her hotel room to unwind before starting to get ready. All of us bridesmaids were already ready. I had to call my mom and tell her that we were at least an hour out. My brother was there waiting already. Oh, and it was October, Halloween, around 40th and windy, and it was an outdoor wedding in a park with no indoor venue attached. Their poor guests ended up waiting more than an hour and a half. The divorce papers have been filed and should be final within a few months. Wow, what a story. If I had been in your situation, I think I would have asked if she was fucking serious, and if she said yes, I would have walked out and left. The selfishness of her is breathtaking. The wedding was fake. Bride and groom were quite young and dated happily for several months. Bride was in a hurry to settle down, I think to fit in with our friendship group who had, or were doing the same, and pushed for engagement, and groom was reasonably happy to oblige, but not ready to take the next step, and wanted a long engagement. Bride began pushing to set wedding dates almost immediately. Groom's mother and father were unwell with both physical and mental health issues. Getting closer to the wedding date, groom made it known that he loved bride, but wasn't ready to settle down yet. Bride wasn't having any of it, and complained to her own immediate family about this, who start harassing groom's parents about how he's a dog, mistreating their daughter, etc. Groom agrees to go ahead with the wedding if bride's family leave his parents alone. Wife wasn't happy with this, and called the celebrant to talk some sense into him. Celebrant refused to perform a wedding where one party wasn't on board. Bride insisted the event go ahead, and that they pretended was real, but with a bunch of guests who had been married or attended weddings recently. We all immediately noticed the celebrant didn't say the words legally required for marriage. Edit. In Australia. Evidently this isn't a requirement elsewhere, and no paperwork was signed. Groom's parents refused to attend the reception, leaving table one half empty, and not paying for the bar service. Guests took back their gifts. Bride and groom avoided each other the entire time except for a super awkward first dance. The whole thing was super surreal and awkward. They split up a couple of months later. She cared more about having a wedding than a marriage. Sad. She was barely around during the reception and no one could find the bride. 2 weeks later she was already cheating on her husband. They were divorced in less than a year. Ouch. I've attended quite a few weddings that have ended in divorce, and I swear you can tell at the wedding. I have attended all 3 of my uncle's weddings. With the first 2 it seemed to me that we as a family had more fun than the brides. The divorces both did not take long. The second wife literally permanently left the country and told my uncle not to follow her. She was a perfectionist and could not deal with the fact that my uncle's business was failing. My uncle is one of those guys with his head in the clouds. Not incredibly ambitious. Kinda like a puppy. Wife number 3 is great. He is happy. They had a kid. Both their first and basically what he has always wanted. Happy ending. Edit. Added a missing back quote. One of those guys with his head in the clouds. Not incredibly ambitious. Kinda like a puppy. Same. I like to think of myself as a golden retriever. I have a few. Most obvious one was the bride getting caught blowing somebody other than her husband in the parking lot between the wedding ceremony and reception. And for part B, they aren't together. They weren't even together when the reception started. Try not to suck any dick on the way to the parking lot. So, I mean, at least she made it to the parking lot. Bride cried and looked so nervous during the ceremony. Saddest bride I'd ever seen. Marriage lasted less than a year. Spoke to her years after, and she told me he'd been physically and mentally abusing her all the time. That's awful. I hope she is much happier now. Not at the wedding, but at the practice run the night before. Bride and groom get in an argument because the bride doesn't want the groom to kiss her for longer than just a quick peck on the lips. Marriage lasted about 2 years. Some people just have different levels of PDA that they're comfortable with. Not to the wedding part yet, but my friend got engaged to his GF. And not too long ago she told my fiancé, they are best friends, that she was going to the clinic to get a standard test and needed an alibi to hide it from my friend. Still don't know how to bring this up without completely destroying people's lives. If she tells her fiancé that she does have a standard and possibly gave it to her friend, you're really going to have a moral dilemma on your hands, lol. Well, at her bachelorette party she broke down, drunk, and told us that she knew she shouldn't marry him and that she knew it wouldn't work. We begged her not to go through with it, but she did. On the day of the wedding, his uncle pulled him aside and said, you don't have to do this. While counting out $100 bills, the wedding was delayed due to a storm. This caused the bride to get angry and snap at everyone who even tried to talk to her. Finally the storm let up and the wedding took place. Mid-reception the bride angrily stormed out of the reception, and that kind broke up the festivities. No, they are not still married. She started cheating on her husband less than a year in, and they divorced shortly thereafter. This was 15 to 16 years ago. He remarried a year or so later and is still married to that woman. She just finished up her second divorce. I haven't talked to her in years because, well, she's a really toxic person who does not see how her actions contribute directly to her misery, and I no longer live in our tiny hometown, so I don't have to be friends with shitty people I don't like that much anyway. I love the uncle trying to bribe him not to do it. I just imagine him looking like Mitchell Corleone with a couple of heavies behind him. Well, the wedding was in his parents' lounge. It was a quickie wedding, and she was 8 months pregnant, both very young. He paused partway through his vows and said, "I love my child, that's why I'm doing this." Then he cried. I tried to stop it, told him not to do it out of obligation to the child. He said he had to. She glared at me, and his parents were furious at me. They got married, had 3 kids, cheated on each other all through their marriage. He's with someone else now, and both have kids to other people. She's a single mom now, but he cheated on his new partner with her, and they tried to make it work before giving up again and reverting back to him going back to his partner and her being single. They have a weird connection, I guess. Didn't know them personally, but there was a story in my town of the bride walking in on the groom sexually assaulting the maid of honor at the wedding. And they went through with the wedding anyway. Then said bride was the maid of honor at her maid of honor's wedding a week or 2 later. And I think it was sometime after this that the maid of honor reported the assault. I think this wins the most fucked up prize in this thread. Husband disappeared 2 hours into a 6-hour reception because he was bored. Just went into the house and hung out on his phone. It was a chill ranch thing with games and drinking and dancing. Adults only. Also, I didn't meet him until the wedding while me and the bride, hung out pretty frequently. So there was some lead up to that, didn't help. He wasn't cheating, just watching golf videos. Edit also they lasted less than 2 months. Second edit for clarity, they didn't divorce because of that. Dude 180D, as soon as the ring was on, going golfing every night for hours with different groups of people. She asked him to limit it to a couple times a week. She suggested therapy. He blew her off. She got out and is much happier. The wedding was semi-destination, 6 hours away. His friends drove out there and he ditched them too. The reception was more bonfire way with free booze and yard games. Stuff both of them had done before with his friends. He bounced right after the obligatory wedding stuff when we finally got to do fun things. I could try and psychoanalyze what he was thinking, but who knows? Probably some kind of regret. The dude doesn't get to decide what's boring if he went home to watch videos of golf. He was so hammered he could barely stand for his vows, and they got in a huge fight at the reception. Lasted less than a year. Where I'm from, it's illegal to marry 2 people if one party, or both, are intoxicated. Source: Minister asked my dad if he was sure about marrying my mom at their wedding, because if he wasn't he could pretend he found out my dad was drunk, so he wouldn't be able to legally marry them. They are together still. 30 years. But my dad loves telling that story. Bride kept telling anyone who'd listen that she booked the wedding through Groupon and it was super cheap. They hadn't planned to get married until she saw the deal online. Not sure how long it lasted, but she posted a sarcastic comment about how successful her marriage was on Facebook on her first anniversary using the memories feature. Don't get me wrong, I love a coupon, but the most important decision I would make, because I got a bargain, is what to eat for dinner. My parents attended a wedding where the bride's mother persistently told the groom to pay more attention to her daughter, that is the bride, instead of just chatting with his friends. The bride seemed upset. My parents came back from the wedding, which was in spring, predicting it would be over by Christmas. 5 years and 2 children later, the couple are still together and seem pretty happy. I can get this. My wife and I at our wedding spent a good bit of time socializing separately. There were lots of people there we don't see often, but we had been living together for 3 years and own a home together. We didn't feel the need to be attached at the hip throughout the whole thing. Obviously we still spent plenty of time socializing together too, but nothing seemed out of place with spending time apart too. He overdosed about 2 years later. He went missing right before the reception to do a couple lines with his friends. We searched for him everywhere and had to postpone the entrance because we couldn't find him. So much stuff came out after his death. Even with his addiction issues, he absolutely loved and adored my best friend. I feel so sad to see how it all ended. Damn, that's rough. Went to a wedding for an extended family member a few months ago where, during the ceremony, she bent down and washed his feet in this bowl. He did not wash her feet. It took a weirdly long time, and it was super awkward. Then the vows were all about how the woman must always submit. It's only been a few months, but I don't know how long it'll last. That is creepy. My good friend was marrying this guy. We will call him Ned. Ned definitely had a drinking problem that everyone swept under the rug. He promised my friend he would keep it under wraps for the wedding. He made it down the aisle, but by the reception he was binge drinking. By then end of the night the groom Ned completely disappeared. No one could find him. A few nervous laughs turned into mild panic when the lights were turned on in an effort to find him. My husband decided to go look for him in the parking lot, where he finds Ned on his lips in the dirt. He had smoked a joint and got the spits. My husband tried to talk sense into him, reminding him, "This is your wedding, dude." He got Ned to come inside and did the most cringy walk of shame past the bride's family, who was very cross with him. Ned was supposed to drive them 11 miles from the venue to their hotel in bride's grandfather's vintage Corvette. He was too drunk to drive, so the bride's grandfather drove them, and the bride had to sit on the middle armrest with no seatbelts. Grandpa drops them at the hotel. Bride barely gets groom up to the room, where he passes out on the bed. Bride had to wander the halls looking for someone to help her out of her wedding dress, since her groom was passed out drunk. The word annulment was definitely floating around that next morning. As crushed as the bride was, she stuck it out. 3 years later they are now separated and divorcing because he is still a drunk. Oh man, that brings back memories. My friend's wedding had a hotel nearby, so most of us stayed there rather than drive home. Get a call after the party while settling into the room. "Hey, it's me, bride. Can you come up here? Hurry." I immediately go into panic mode. Grab some cash and keys thinking I needed to make a getaway with the bride. I get there and she's like, "Can you help get my dress off the buttons? Are too small for hubby." And she hands me this hook thing. WTF, who thought this was a good idea? 10 minutes of frantically unbuttoning while groom is pouring champagne, lighting candles, wedding dress designers, zips, velcro, literally anything besides tiny buttons that require a neurosurgeon, steady hands and an extremely sober person. Worked as a cook for a 4-year in advance booked wedding spot. I would prep 4 days, work 1 wedding, and have my days off. My weddings were Saturdays. I'd never see the ceremony, often off-site. If on-site, I was busy. So this one wedding, people complained about the sun reflecting off the water. They booked the time and place themselves, refusal help, but blamed us for not having a sun shield of some sort. Had 100 more people there than planned. Party. And we ran out of food. 40 and 140 are 2 different beasts. Begins to turn to a coke party. 30 seconds after the food, like, everyone went to their cars and the washrooms. I mean 100 people at once, bride and groom, their parents, strung up. The poor DJ got his work in. Bride would come in and grab his wrists, telling him to change songs every 45 seconds. Play this now, now this. People started whispering a bunch, like, everywhere there was something up. More coke, more whispers. A security guy comes up to me and tells me the new husband is passed out in his car. Dead drunk, car is running. New wife is now loose and fucks someone. It is unknown who, not husband, behind out garbage cans. You're in the wrong thread. We are talking about disaster weddings here, not best weddings ever. The bride was constantly on her phone and very often had to go to the bathroom with it, like a lot. She did this a lot the year of the wedding, and on the day of, and something didn't seem right. So someone followed her. She went into one of those family bathrooms that only had 1 toilet in it, and she forgot to lock the door. One of the bridesmaids opens the door and the bride is spread eagle finger blasting herself on FaceTime with an ex-BF. Wedding obviously was stopped at this point. Groom was furious. Turns out she had been cheating on the groom pretty much the entire time they had ever been together. Asterisk asterisk, holy shit, I wasn't expecting this to blow up so much. To answer some questions. No, they didn't get married. I have no idea if her and the bridesmaid are still friends. As far as I know, the bride moved on to the next victim. I ran into the groom maybe 4 months after this all happened. He said when he left the reception, he went and packed a suitcase and flew to Jamaica for like 2 weeks, quit his job, changed his phone number, and when he came back, she was gone. Doesn't know where she is and doesn't care. He sold his house and bought a piece of property and built a small house on it, like 700 square feet. I don't remember what he does for a living now, but he made it clear he will never trust another woman again. Haven't seen him since then.